Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Love
We're going to
it.
wait a couple of minutes to see if a few more people hop on, and then we'll get started. Thank you for being here. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Speak. We are so excited to have Dr. Katie Frank with us today. I have been to several of her presentations, and the information is always amazing, great, very applicable. Today, she's going to be presenting on cultivating effective social skills for successful community participation. Thank you for being with us, Katie.
Sorry, I was trying to share my screen and then it was on the same screen as what we were do oh gosh. Okay. So hopefully perfect. Shouldn't see any boxes, right? Wonderful. All right, so thank you so much, Whitney, for inviting me to speak today. I'm very excited to talk about cultivating effective social skills for successful community participation. For those of you who haven't listened to anything I've said in the past, I work as an occupational therapist at the Adult Down Syndrome Center in Park Ridge, Illinois. If you've ever flown in or out of O'Hare Airport, you've probably flown right over our clinic, and this is a picture. We are a primary and specialty care clinic that sees adolescents and adults with Down syndrome ages 12 and older. We have been around since 1992 and we've seen over 6,000 unique individuals with Down syndrome. We have 5 family medicine physicians in our practice, as well as myself as an occupational therapist, and we have a social worker and some patient advocates, and then the whole other team that supports us. In addition to the medical care that we provide, I also provide social skills groups, and we provide a variety of other groups to enhance the health and wellness for individuals with Down syndrome. And then this is my why. So I became an occupational therapist and wanted to always work with individuals with Down syndrome because of my little sister Tori. So the picture on the left was in 1984 when she was born. And then the picture on the right was just last year because she ended up passing away in 1987. And in at the National Down Syndrome Society puts 500 pictures of individuals with Down syndrome in Times Square every year as part of their buddy walk. And we were honored by them accepting my sister's picture. So you can't really tell, but it's me and my older sister. Our backs are to the picture, and that is Tori on the live streaming in Times Square last September. Just to note that this presentation is for educational purposes only, and while there will be time for questions at the end, I'll try to make my answers to questions as like generic as possible, so that people can apply it to their life, even if you're asking about your loved one. And today we're really going to focus on the importance of social skills and learn practical ways to help teach them. So let's start with a little bit of background. Social skills are skills that we use to communicate and interact with other people. We use both verbal and nonverbal skills. We use our gestures, our body language, and even our personal appearance. And all of these are learned skills. And for many of us, we learned them just naturally by observing others. But for our loved ones with Down syndrome, oftentimes we need to teach these skills. So, why is it important to teach these skills? Learning and maintaining social competency is challenging for all of us. And many of the mental health and physical health struggles that we see at the clinic have a social skills component. And our mental health really can impact our physical health. And this is because rules aren't clear. They're often unwritten and may not apply to all social situations. And the other thing about social skills is it requires abstract thinking. And this can be really challenging for individuals with Down syndrome because they're such concrete thinkers. So if we think about sayings like, call me anytime, or my door is always open, or it is what it is, all of these colloquialisms that we use can be very confusing for individuals with Down syndrome. And so a lack of appropriate social skills can lead to negative consequences. So maybe it'll be embarrassment, disagreements, perhaps being reprimanded at work or school, maybe even losing a job or even a friend. Another thing to consider is that many individuals who are not as familiar with interacting with individuals with Down syndrome may assume that the person has appropriate social skills, especially if they're easy to understand, right? So when they talk, they are able to articulate very well and easily understood by those that are less familiar with people with Down syndrome. And they may appear conversational, but actually, when they're participating in general conversations, many times it can be because of scripted speech, right? So that they know how to ask how you are, or maybe a few other general questions. And then they either talk about whatever they want it to talk about, even if it's off topic, or they just stop talking and walk away. Because in their mind, the conversation's over because they did what they were supposed to do. And that can be really confusing for people that aren't familiar with individuals with Down syndrome. And the other thing is that individuals with Down syndrome may have that slow auditory processing. And so it can be challenging for them to keep up with the pace of a conversation. And so that could also be why they appear off topic. Because when we're having a conversation and they're listening, they're still trying to process what we were talking about. And then maybe like a minute or two later, they chime in with their response, and we've already moved on. And so they appear like they're being off topic, but really it could have been that long for them to process what was being said, to then come up with an answer, and then to participate. Right. And then the last thing is that people with Down syndrome really want to do the right thing. And again, while we naturally pick up on social cues, they need to be taught explicitly. And so there's many teachable moments or opportunities for social skills in the community, and we're going to talk about that today. So at one point, I asked participants at the Adult Down Syndrome Center, why do you want good social skills? So some of the participants, this isn't just one participant, but many participants said things like, helps me be successful at school and work, helps me make friends and have a good relationship with others, including my family. So I can meet someone to date if I want, and I can be polite and have good manners. And then I asked them, what social situations are hard for you? And they said, it's hard to talk to people I do not know. It's hard to be part of a conversation, especially when someone talks too fast. It's hard for me to think of things to talk about, and it's hard for me to go places when I do not know what to expect. Right? So, of course, we can see where if they're feeling these feelings, right, and they're already going into these social situations with a little anxiety, why it might be hard for them to always act appropriately. But we do know that there is an importance for community participation for individuals with Down syndrome, right? So if they work, they can have some financial support, right? That they have money of their own to spend. And employment can be community based, it can be workshop based, and even although it might be unpaid, volunteer opportunities can be kind of considered employment. When they get out in the community, it can increase their self-esteem. It really can provide a sense of purpose. It gives them those natural opportunities for social engagement and communication. They can develop agency and they can learn how to advocate for themselves. It really can encourage a healthy lifestyle. So at the Adult Down Syndrome Center, we think about a healthy lifestyle being a three-legged stool. So it's not just about our physical health, but also our mental health and our social health. And then we know that individuals with Down syndrome are lifelong learners and they can learn when they're out in the community. So, what are some common social skills areas of concern? This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are many of the things that we see at the Adult Down Syndrome Center and often some of the skills that we talk about in our social skills groups that we offer. So, they may have challenges communicating their needs. Skill, like when there's a lack of rules, they may not know how to act or what to expect. Gray areas, right? Because we know that they're concrete thinkers. They may not know what appropriate conversation topics are, especially because we might have different rules for that in different environments. In a work environment, or even an educational environment, they might not know what the professional boundaries are. So what they talk about with their boss may be different than what they talk about with their coworker. Personal and social boundaries, problem solving skills, managing their emotions effectively, flexibility. So we know that individuals with Down syndrome do great with the groove, that preference for repetition and routine and sameness. However, because they do so well with the groove and they like what they know and what they're comfortable with, it can be hard for them to be flexible. Kind of already mentioned conversation skills with people in various roles, planning skills, and initiation skills. And then some of the common community participation scenarios that we hear about is maybe that if they have too much downtime at work, they don't really know what to do. They may just sit there and wait to be told what to do, or they start acting silly, or they just walk away, right? They need more structure. They want to make friends when they're out in the community, and that can be really hard because they may not know appropriate people to be friends with, or again, what to say to people. It could end up being that when they get a peer's phone number, then that they're constantly calling and texting. Maybe there's too many tasks to do and remember when they're out in the community, whether it's at work or they're volunteering or they're just at a program. And so then they get overwhelmed because they don't know where to even begin. Oftentimes, because of the groove, if they get interrupted in what they're doing, they may have trouble getting back on track. So they may have to start that task all over from the beginning, or they, have a meltdown because they got interrupted. If they become overwhelmed, maybe they just freeze because they just don't know what to do next. They have a hard time admitting mistakes and asking for help. So for so long, Because again, I work with adults, but this is an important thing to teach younger children also, right? It's okay to ask for help. But for so long, parents have been pushing and pushing and pushing for these individuals to be independent. And they don't understand that you can be independent and still ask for help. But they have this fear, this worry that if they ask for help, it's making them less independent. So we teach them that one of the skills of adulting is to ask for help when needed, and that's okay. Again, we see a lot of socially inappropriate behavior, whether it's sexual or not in nature, and then just withdrawing from others. So being aware of the skills that our children need to develop in order to be chronologically age appropriate, right? So if they're 18, they need to act like an 18-year-old, regardless of their developmental age. I used to work in Cincinnati at a Down syndrome clinic before I moved to Chicago. And one of my patients from Cincinnati happened to be in Chicago for a weekend with his family. And I met up with them for dinner. And the family at the restaurant made their son order, even though he's not completely easy to understand, right? We all can understand him because we're just familiar with them. But again, this is someone new. And it's a loud environment at this restaurant. But the parents were like, you need to be able to do this because we're not always going to be around. And this is important to us because we like to eat out. And he did a great job. He didn't get frustrated. He wasn't nervous. He just said what he wanted. And then we kind of helped him point to it just so that he didn't get frustrated if the server was like, what? I don't hear you. I don't understand you. I can't hear you, whatever it might be. And the server was wonderful and responded so well to him. But those are important skills. And that's again kind of using that teachable moment that I mentioned. And these are skills, and we'll talk about it, that you can practice at home first, but then you want to generalize that skill and also practice it in the community. It's also important to think about, is your family missing out on anything? So maybe you haven't been going out to dinner as a family because you're worried about how your loved one is going to respond, right? Because maybe they have some socially inappropriate behaviors. So perhaps you start working at home again on these socially appropriate behaviors. And then maybe you invite people over to your home to work on those when new people are around. And then you can work on those again, then out in the community. Perhaps just having a restaurant night at home. So you pretend someone's ordering and bringing the food, and you have other sounds going on because it could also be sensory that is impacting someone's ability to go out into the restaurant because they don't know what to expect. There could be plates clanking and dishes dropping and all these conversations. So you can try to replicate that at home to practice. Right. And when you're practicing these skills, you want to work on being polite and following directions and using your silverware when you're eating, maybe asking for help to cut the food, trying to be flexible if your food doesn't come when you want it to, right? And managing downtime. What do you do after you order before your food comes? Right. And so these are all important things to consider in order to practice the new skills and maximize the independence. But also understand that you can't fix everything at once, so just pick one skill to address. And if you've met one person with Down syndrome, congratulations. You've met one person with Down syndrome. However, we do know that there are some qualities of individuals with Down syndrome, and that many of these strategies that I'm going to talk about will work for most individuals with Down syndrome. And the first one is that we want to teach how the individual learns best. And many individuals with Down syndrome are visual learners, right? They do best when they can see something, and then that helps them process it. So even if you see and say at the same time, they need to see it to process it faster. So we can use visuals, videos, modeling, a lot of repetition and practice. We also want to say what to do instead of what not to do. So trying to establish rules and expectations and being concrete. Now, again, this is great for individuals, but it can be challenging because of the groove, right? Because we still need to figure out how to teach that flexibility. So again, we have these rules and expectations, and we're trying to be concrete, but sometimes there's changes to our routine that we're trying to establish. And we really want to provide positive reinforcement for desired behaviors and teaching age appropriate material in a developmentally appropriate manner. So, like I said, we do want to consider how they learn best. And many of us are visual learners, some can be auditory learners, and some need movement and practice. And like I said, while individuals with Down syndrome tend to be more visual learners, they also require lots of repetition and practice in order to learn new skills. So when we think about those visual learners, we want to use role play or demonstration. Perhaps we look at a social story or pictures or words like lists. Oftentimes, movies and TV shows are a great way to use that teachable moment because they tend to recite things that they watch in movies or on TV. So we can use that to gauge their understanding, like, why did this happen? Or has that ever happened to you? Right? What could we have done differently? Things like that. Movement learners do well with role play, demonstration, and again, just that need to practice. So that's where like having restaurant night at home can help. And then auditory learners. So we know individuals with Down syndrome may engage in self-talk, and self-talk in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's their way of processing something that's going on, right? And so they may learn something and then kind of recite back to them what they're supposed to do. Role play, again, is a way to benefit auditory learners. Maybe they're reading the social story or listening to someone else reading it. Just providing verbal prompts or verbal praise can be a way to help an auditory learner. So, how can we apply these strategies to teaching some of these social skills? So, when it comes to appropriate conversation topics, it's important to teach general conversation skills, right? So, what to talk about, how to ask and answer a question, even like the reciprocity of a conversation. Because if you've ever, had a conversation with someone with Down syndrome or watched two people with Down syndrome try to have a conversation, tends to be one person always asks the question and one person always answers the question, but may not ask a question back. So we talk about how you can't get to know someone if you're not also asking them questions. And so sometimes when we work on this, we might play like take a ball and play catch. So I have the ball, I ask a question, I throw it to the person, they answer the question, ask me the question, a question back. It might be the same one, it could be a different one, and then they throw the ball and I answer. So we talk about it being like a tennis match or playing catch. We can use visuals to talk about appropriate conversations. In the house, we want to model appropriate conversations. When something's inappropriate, use that as a teachable moment. Don't just let it slide because they have Down syndrome. And you want to teach it in a respectful, non-punitive manner. And again, practicing. So you can practice all this at home. And so I'll always show some resources that we have in our resource library. This one is specifically for work, but it can, be applicable to a variety of community settings, right? So what's appropriate at work when it comes to conversations, right? We want to make people feel good and use nice words, right? Be friendly, but, and professional, right? What not to do. Let's not talk about personal, private things like weight or private body parts or private clothing, right? We don't want to yell at someone. We don't want to make someone feel bad. Things like that. So here's one resource. We have rules for conversation because, again, we talk about how individuals with Down syndrome respond really well if we create rules. It helps them manage their expectations and know what to do. So when we want to make sure we have good personal space and that we talk loud enough that someone can hear and that we look at the person and things like that. And so those are important skills in order to have conversations. And then, one of the other skill areas was communicating with various people, right? You want to have, it's like a puzzle piece, right? Conversations require the right fit between the person and the topic. And so what you talk about with a coworker or a peer is different than your manager or supervisor, right? Or a customer. And so it's important to, use visual supports like this You want to model that behavior, maybe role play or practice outside the area, in which it's really funny about role play because we do know so many individuals with Down syndrome love to sing and dance and be in the theater. But when it comes to role playing some of these scenarios, they have a harder time because they're like, I don't have a sister, or I don't work at the grocery store. And so we have to find ways that they can apply it to themselves, that they realize it's something that is part of their life. And then again, using those teachable moments, they need to happen quickly. So if they do say something wrong, we correct them, but again, a polite, proactive way, right? So that they don't feel like they're being punished. We just want to say, I love that you were trying to have a conversation with that person. Could we have talked about this instead of that? Or could we have, perhaps tried to shake their hands when we met them instead of going in for a hug? Things like that. And I don't know how familiar you all are with the circles curriculum, but it is a way that has concentric circles, and the further out you get from the center, which is where that person is, the less you talk, trust, and touch them. So that is a way to talk about how we can talk to different people in our lives. Again, we talked about self-talk, not a bad thing, but it's probably not appropriate in public. And so we want the individual to know that if they want to talk, engage in self-talk, that they just go somewhere private. And then filters. So I like to say that many individuals with Down syndrome have diarrhea of the mouth. Anything that comes into their head, they just say, whether it's something that's part of the conversation or something that I should know. So we can talk about we have a thought bubble and we have a talk bubble. And so not all the things that we think need to come out of our mouth. And so there's a resource for that. And when it comes to communicating needs, it's important to remember that if a person uses a communication device, make sure that they have it available to them in the community. And perhaps you can program common phrases or like have different pages for different things. So maybe a work page where they have those phrases that they need. And then for the different activities, whether it's Special Olympics or a theater program or going to Gigi's Playhouse or whatever it might be, having a specific page with different things so that they have an easier time communicating with others. And perhaps finding alternate or multiple ways to communicate. So I know with one of our Down syndrome groups here, they do adult social club, and frequently they go out to eat somewhere. And so there are some individuals who maybe aren't able to communicate as well, and so but they have to order for themselves. So they may have it like on their phone where they text what they want to order and they can just show that to the server. Or again, going through the menu before they get there so that they know what they want and maybe they can point to what they want, so that they don't feel like the stress and anxiety of having to order when they know that that's something that's challenging for them. And then when they're out in the community, sometimes it's really important for the people there to have some information about the individual with Down syndrome. So perhaps if they use special words or signs to communicate, make sure that the community partner knows that. And it's also important for them, if they don't work with a lot of people with Down syndrome, to know that there are certain strategies that are more effective when communicating with someone with Down syndrome. You want to give them choices. Do you want to do this or this? Or this needs to happen. Do you want to do it now or in 5 minutes? Right? Or first, we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. And really usually using simplified language and speaking slowly in order to give that individual time to process what's being asked. And letting that person know that if they're having trouble keeping up with the conversation, they may remove themselves, and that's not a sign of disrespect. And maybe the person can then provide prompts to help the person with Down syndrome stay focused. Let the community partners know about self-talk and, say it's okay to allow it to happen as long as it's not being disruptive, but you can also direct it somewhere else. And then also talking a little bit about scripted speech. So we know that individuals with Down syndrome may have, again, those certain words or phrases they use. They may be repeating phrases or scenes from movies. and that that's their way of trying to participate in a conversation. And if you're not there to support them, the community partner may not understand what's going on. The other thing, thinking about it, is, letting them know that individuals with Down syndrome may talk about things in the past as if they're happening right now or they happened yesterday. And so, like, a lot of times someone will be like, my grandfather died. And we're like, oh my gosh. And then we find out the grandfather died like 8 years ago, right? And so it's not, the person couldn't um, articulate that, right? But to them, it also may have felt like it just happened. When it comes to personal or social boundaries, we really want to teach that personal boundaries are more about like the adequate distance during conversations and interactions. And our social boundaries are like who we talk to, when we talk to them, how much or how often we talk to them, and what we say to them. And so again, we want to use visuals and modeling and practice and teachable moments. So we have a variety of resources. And again, I'm not showing you all of them, but like one resource we have is about relationships. And this can be with friendships or romantic relationships. We have one way and two way. So one way would mean one person wants to be a friend or romantic partner and the other one doesn't. And two way is when they both want the same thing, right? And two way means we can be a friend or romantic partner, and one way doesn't. And then we have a resource on boundaries that talks about the personal versus the social boundaries. And we have a video, we have multiple videos in our resource library. This one in particular stars Christina and her friends and family talking about how Christina can appropriately touch different people in her life. Kind of goes back to the visual I showed a while ago. I think I showed it. Sorry, I've already given one other presentation this morning, so now I'm getting them a little confused. In our videos that we have on the resource library, they do star people with Down syndrome because we know from research that if you can't be the person in the video, watching yourself doing something to learn, it's best if the person can look like you. So in all of our videos, we try to have stars with Down syndrome so that it's motivating to learn these new skills. We know that social media can be challenging and phone use can be challenging, especially when we're trying to make these new friendships. And so we have rules for when to use the phone and how to use the phone. Um, and again, rules for social media, what we can post, things like that. And again, we're trying to tell them you can do it, but this is what you should do. We talked a lot about flexibility and how it can be very challenging. So again, you want to use the groove until you can't, right? Um, and knowing that grooves establish quickly, that you want to try to redirect if it's not a groove that you want to be established, and trying to like plan ahead and maybe include flexibility from the start. So perhaps if it's an employment, maybe they can rotate through different jobs at the site, right? Or at school or at programs, maybe they work with different people, and not setting like a firm routine that would be difficult to maintain, because we also know that changes to routine can really be challenging for individuals with Down syndrome, and we might see some socially inappropriate behavior if there's those unexpected changes. And again, trying to provide predictability, but with flexibility. So, depending on where they are, maybe there's a general category like work tasks or cleaning tasks or social time, right? So you're not saying exactly what they're doing, but you're kind of giving like the category so that it doesn't hold you to like they have to do this, then this, then this every time they're there. Because there can be a variety of work tasks or a variety of cleaning tasks or a variety of, social time tasks. And so that can kind of help work on teaching flexibility and gaining that skill while still being predictable. And so this is just an example. You can use calendars for that. This is a weekly calendar to help this patient kind of know what to expect. And again, it could be general because like on day program day, we don't know what they do, whether they're going into the community, whatever. We just know they're going to day program, whether she's working or has her other activities. And it still gives time for other things to happen during the day because it's not like she's at at Target first thing in the morning, right? So other things can happen in the morning, but she knows that like Tuesday is a work day. And then rules apply to everyone. Really, we all have rules. But it's important then to make sure that the rules aren't specific just to the person with Down syndrome, right? Because it's not fair if they have a rule, but other people are allowed to do things differently. It can cause confusion and potentially frustration. And there are exceptions to the rules, but then that can also be really challenging. So we had two individuals. They both worked at a grocery store. So Jewel is one of the grocery stores in Illinois, and but they worked at two different locations. And so they both came in for a social skills group and they were wearing different color uniform shirts. And they started to get in a fight saying that, you're not wearing the right shirt. That's the wrong color. And, what they didn't understand is her location wore a red shirt and the other one had a blue shirt. And so neither one of them was wrong, right? Or maybe they have, like thinking about the hospital. If you're in a hospital setting, the people that wear scrubs, they all wear different color scrubs based on the role that they have in the hospital. Right. And so while everyone wears scrubs, they could be different colors. Or maybe someone got hurt. And so then they're sitting when everyone else has to stand. So we can try to explain the exceptions to the rules, but it's important that when we establish rules, they apply to everyone and then that they're posted. So thinking about cell phone use, right? That can be a hard thing at a day program, at job, whatever it might be. So like in our social skills groups, we say that your phone needs to stay like in your bag or pocket, something like that. We don't want to see it. Um, and thinking, again, and that applies to everyone. So like I do the same thing. We're just not supposed to be on our phone. It's disrespectful to the people that are participating. Right. We also want to try to make sure that when we establish these rules, we do it from the very beginning because it can be very hard to start something and then be like, oh, this is the rule, and then change it. We also want to model, right? And so model the appropriate behavior when it comes to the rule, when it comes to the exception to the rule, right? So if you see the person wearing the wrong color uniform shirt or maybe even just uniform if you're on a sports team, you don't have to go up and like criticize them, right? We can practice just keeping it to ourselves. It's not a big deal kind of thing. So here's just some visuals kind of support it. Like I said, our group rules, these are for our in-person. Maybe we have like what their expected behaviors are, that they're going to have their hands in themselves and good listening ears and personal boundaries and ask permission and use nice words. And then thinking about house rules. So it can be challenging if all of a sudden you're like, they're an adult, right? And you're like, you have to go to bed, but I get to stay up, right? And so for one family, we said, the individual with Down syndrome wanted to stay up till like 3 or 4 in the morning. So we created a 1 a.m. bedtime for the whole house. Now, mom was already asleep before 1 a.m., but it was a house rule. And so that helped the individual with Down syndrome go to bed earlier. And she liked to sleep with the lights on and she wanted to keep the TV on. So it was like, oh, at 1 a.m. when we go to bed, we also have to turn off the lights and turn off the TV. And it doesn't matter who is the last one to go to bed, that's a house rule. Or another one, we do a lot with healthy lifestyle and, for weight loss and healthy eating and physical activity. And the individual with Down syndrome was sneaking food into her room. But we also know that dad brings his like food into the garage or wherever his workspace is. So we made it a rule because we didn't want the patient not eating, sneaking food. So it was a rule for the house. You can only eat in the kitchen and dining room. And that went for dad also. So having everyone on board can really help when it comes to establishing rules. And we know, obviously, we've talked about it, that abstract thinking is hard. So the goal is to make things as black and white as possible. And this can be challenging because not everything is black and white, right? So again, we want to try to establish those rules and plan for obstacles. So if you're thinking about someone who, let's say, has a job, at McDonald's and they do a lot of the cleaning. So maybe they clean the bathroom, they clean the trays, they clear the tables, and they kind of have their first, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that. And all of a sudden, it's time for them to go to clean the bathroom, and the bathroom's busy, right? So maybe it's a single stall, and they knock on the door, and then they keep knocking, right? Because the door is locked. And they like like I have to clean, like they start kind of getting escalated because they know that that's their job. They can't think, oh shoot, the bathroom's full. I should wait and maybe go do the trays and come back, right? Maybe they just sit and at the door and wait till that person comes out, right? Or, they don't know that they can do something else or find a supervisor. So you want to try to plan for obstacles. And like I said, trying to limit the use of non-literal phrases. I'm always here for you. We're family here. Call me anytime, right? Because they will do those things. Again, you want to say what to do instead of what not to do. That helps with the gray area and offer choices and giving them choices that need to happen or can happen, that it's not a big deal which one they select. We know that managing emotions is so hard for all of us. And so it's important to teach um, how to identify emotions, how to identify when our body may be telling us how we're feeling by whether we're crying or smiling, right? There's ways that our body can show us that we're feeling a certain emotion, maybe coming up with what triggers us to feel certain emotions, and then calming and coping strategies. So we have a variety of resources that can teach this with visual supports. You might want to always have identify a safe place that they can take a break if they're feeling overwhelmed. We also talk about we don't want our volcano to explode. So maybe they know, oh my gosh, I feel like my volcano is going to explode. I need a break and I know where to go. It's important maybe for us to recognize their cues that their volcano's, going to explode and we prompt them to take a break. Acknowledge if you're having a bad day, because this is the thing. Individuals with Down syndrome have empathy radar. And so they kind of can internalize our feelings, even if we think we're hiding them pretty well. And it can change their behavior. So we can say, hey, I'm not feeling great today. And it's okay, right? And you're also then modeling what you're doing instead. Like, I didn't sleep well. I'm pretty tired. I'm a little cranky, but I'm going to do my best. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go take a break. And then again, practicing these calming and coping skills and creating a plan. So you might want to have an emotions communication board so that they can point to how they're feeling. Or in the middle is different strategies you can use to help calm down or cope, and then you can create that plan. When I'm feeling, what lists the strong emotion that you're feeling, I'm going to stop, think, and make a good choice. What's my good choice? I might try meditating, taking deep breaths, and counting to 10 or something like that. So they can create that plan. Again, we talk about calming strategies and coping strategies. So calming strategies are things we do immediately, and sometimes those work and we can move on from our strong emotions. But if our strong emotions continue and the calming strategies didn't work, maybe we want to do coping strategies. So we have resources on that. And then how to show that we're calm, right? No one wants to hear calm down, but when we say something like, let's try to calm, they know that it means sitting in a chair, having their hands in their lap, taking deep breaths, and using nice words, right? Because calm is an abstract concept. Then, when it comes to planning skills and time management, because this is a hard skill for many people, but especially individuals with Down syndrome, we want to use modifications and tools to support this difficulty, right? So visuals and checklists are great to help them understand what needs to be done. Maybe knowing that before assigning the task, know that the work might not be done quickly, right? We just know some individuals with Down syndrome just move at a slower pace, and that's okay. As long as they get it done, it may not matter how long it takes, right? Also, they may not need longer breaks. Just give them a task that requires them to be timely after a break. Maybe doing little check-ins. How you doing? Do you need help? Are you almost finished? Are you ready to move on? Things like that. Setting timers. All right, we're just going to do this for 15 minutes, and it doesn't matter how much you get done. We're going to move on to something else. When the timer goes off, we're all done here. We're going to the next thing. Breaking tasks down into simpler steps. So this is something where when you think about even if you say, go get dressed, there's so much that we actually have to plan for in order to get dressed that we take for granted. So when you say go get dressed, I know that means that I have to get undressed. I have to find clothes that are not only that they match, but they're weather appropriate, right? They're appropriate for wherever I'm going. And then I have to get dressed. But there's a lot of skills needed even to get dressed with its fine motor skills, making sure I put my undergarments on before I put my, like shirt and pants on, right? I can't put my shoes on before my socks. Like all of those things that we take for granted can be very challenging for someone who has difficulty planning. And so again, that's why visuals can work. Um, we want to model and practice, use that teachable moment. Don't automatically assume that the individual can't or shouldn't do a certain task if they struggle at first, right? Let's try to help them problem solve. Again, we might break the task down into simpler steps so they don't have to do the whole task. They can just like start it, or it gets started by someone else and they finish it. So what are some visuals that could work with this? Perhaps it's just like a morning routine. These are all, or a daily routine. This is kind of my checklist of things that I have to get done during the day. It doesn't really matter when. Or here's my morning routine. And those are a couple different ones depending on what they had to do, whether or not they had to get out of the house. And so these can help with planning. Uh, Again, maybe they don't initiate a task or they're very slow at initiating a task. And many of times this can be because something like getting dressed takes so many steps that maybe they just don't know where to start. And then also thinking about of their morning routine. Do we have them get dressed upstairs and then come downstairs and eat breakfast and then they have to go back upstairs to brush their teeth before they come back downstairs to put their shoes on and get out the door? Perhaps we can bring their toothbrushing downstairs to the main level so they don't have to go back upstairs so that we're not like spending even more time with those transitions. Again, this is another opportunity where we break tasks down into simpler steps or take away tasks. Maybe if they have a hard time getting out the door in the morning, we make sure they make their lunch the night before or put out their clothes the night before. So it's one less thing they have to think about. They can just wake up and do it. Visuals, timers, again, those check-ins are going to help keep them on task. Maybe simplifying that task, or like I said, making it so that the sequences, there's fewer transitions. So here, perhaps like when they get to work, they need to clock in, put on their name tag, check in with their boss, get their to-do list, take a break, right? Check in with their boss and then clock out. First and then are really great opportunities. First, we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. Or maybe like at work today, you're going to wipe the counters, then you're going to sort the silverware, you'll wash the trays, mop the floor, break down the boxes, right? Doesn't matter how long it takes, those are just the things. And you know that you've kind of built it in so that they can be successful. Um, for problem solving skills, things like conflict management and coping skills, things don't always go our way, right? What happens when someone says no? How do you handle rejection, right? Even if it's, I want to go to the movies with my friends and our parents tell us no. So maybe visuals or prompts about who they can go to for various things. So if they're at work, they can go to their boss. If they're at Gigi's, they can go to the leader. If they're at Special Olympics, they go to the coach, whatever it might be. And just that visual reminder, maybe, that they can ask for help. Perhaps you're prompting the people that are working with them in the community that they can, hey, do you need help? Right? And so, what might that look like? We have a resource on handling rejection and that it's okay. I statements are a great coping skill. I feel angry when you tell me what to do, right? So much better than throwing a tantrum that you get so mad, right? Perhaps compromise. It's a hard concept for all of us. So, what would that look like? And we come up with 3 different ways that you can compromise. And again, boundaries. Now, for the sake of time, I have cases that we won't go through because I know that there's questions. So I want to make sure that we have time for questions. But it's important to remember that social skills matter, that they need to be learned and can be taught, and that we want to provide intentional opportunities to practice and develop appropriate social skills. For those of you who aren't aware, Doctors Chacoin and McGuire wrote the second edition of Mental Wellness in Adults with Down Syndrome. And then when Woodbine House closed, they decided to make the book free. And so you can download chapters of it or the whole book from our resource library. That's the link, but you can also locate it here with this QR code under resource library. Our resource library has over 600 resources. All of the ones I showed today are on there, plus the book, plus many more. So I highly suggest you checking out our resource library if you haven't. If you're on social media and want to follow us, we highlight one resource a day. And then our email list, we do offer social skills groups via Zoom, and they are free and they are open to people that are not patients. So if you want your loved one to participate in a social skills group, we recommend you sign up for our email list. We send out 1 to 2 emails a month, but that's how we promote our social skills groups. And we don't sell your email or anything, so you don't have to worry about that. Um, I'm also going to give you my contact information. And again, Whitney's going to send out these slides. So I'll go back to the QR code when we answer questions. But I just want you to know that you have my email address and you are welcome to email me with any questions, especially questions that we might not get answered today. So with that, I don't know if there's specific questions that people have. I'm looking at the chat. Yes, all the pages are available online. Oh, thanks, Whitney, for putting in. Um, but I know we have that opportunity that people can